everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Committee Conversations Ethics Edition. As promised, we have today meeting at 17 of the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. This meeting has Marc-Andre Blanchard, who is the Chief of Staff to Prime Minister Mark Carney. If Sabia from last episode is Carney's right hand, this guy would be his left. He is, in my opinion, very arrogant and dismissive throughout this meeting, and I believe in more than one place he may have said more than what he meant to. Let's get rolling with the first clip from Bloc MP Luc Thoreau, who again has some great questions and is not going to take any guff.
Yesterday, I asked a question to Mr. Sabia regarding Bill C-15 for the budget that was tabled 2 days ago at the House. I mentioned the tax credits for small nuclear power plants. At page 91, there is a tax credit that existed 2 years ago, but it did not focus on nuclear power plants, but C-15 adds a tax credit for these small nuclear power plants. In C-15, there is also a new credit for clean energy, and that also includes nuclear power plants on page 120. In that area, there are 5 major players, and one of those is Westinghouse that belongs to Brookfield. In your tool, and I looked at this tool yesterday on page 3, it states to those that need to apply it to pay specific attention to Westinghouse, which belongs to Brookfield, correct? Now, was the Prime Minister a part of that decision? Did you apply the screen? You can understand that given the nature of discussions, yesterday the clerk of the Privy Council brought up 6 decisions that were made regarding the application of the screen since its implementation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm asking you about C-15 regarding the tax credits that were added for nuclear power plants, because I do have other things to say on that. Perhaps I can ask my question in its entirety and you can answer? Yes. Well, if you don't want me to answer the way I was going to answer, then go ahead. You were talking about, well, that's not what I'm talking about.
In that exchange, you can see some tension already. There's always some context that's lost through the translation, but I believe that Thoreau is just trying to confirm that the screen was not implemented because of general application, as Sabia had said the previous day. When Blanchard answers by trying to repeat Sabia's answer and filibuster as much as possible, Thoreau interrupts him to get back on point. The MPs do have limited time, and I think he perhaps didn't get to ask all the questions he wanted of Sabia because Sabia managed to waste so much time in being just difficult in answering questions directly. So this time, Mr. Thoreau is not going to let that happen, which is good because there's a real point to consider. Check this out.
He said to me that it was of general application. Because of that, the screen would not apply. When we look at your document, the definition of general application that's on page 5, it states that if the decision has to do with an indeterminate group of people or companies, the matter is of general application. But I don't think that 5 players is indeterminate. NuScale Power, Westinghouse, General Electric Hitachi, Atkins Rillick, and Technic at Home. On page 6, when we want to see whether or not it applies in a general manner, it's if it applies to a small group that is not a large category. And so that's a problem. Why did you not apply the screen?
See, there's the real question. The document Blanchard himself provided says that the screens should apply to small groups, but not large categories. And we can sure as shit know that it isn't an indeterminate amount because there's a number associated with it, which is determined. So the real question is, why didn't you screen this policy when he has interest in one out of the only 5 companies that are going to be affected by this tax change? How is 5 not a small group? How are you saying that just because there's 4 other companies that will be affected, that he is not in a conflict? Let's hear his response, although I doubt it will be a real answer.
Mr. Sabia gave you the context. In his view, it was a general application and did not require the use of the screen. But I'm asking you the question today. I'm looking at your document. I don't need to repeat the question, I imagine. According to your document, you are not applying this ethics screen when you should have to that situation. I respect your interpretation. That's not your interpretation, that's your document. The process requires a lot of rigor, and for the application of this tool, you can see it.
And as suspected, here we go. His answer is apparently that he does, in fact, see 5 companies as a large enough category of companies to imply the general interest loophole to. I'm guessing, honestly, that any more than 1 company would qualify as a general application in this man's mind, as long as it stood to make him money. But in this meeting, screens are not all they had to ask him about. MP Michael Cooper gets right to brass tacks, asking about some of Mark Carney's actions that seem to be in direct contradiction to instructions from the Ethics Commissioner. Despite the number of times that we heard in this committee that Mark Carney is well aware of his ethical obligations, that may not be so true, or he just may not care about them. Let's check this out.
Mr. Sabia, in his testimony yesterday before this committee, referenced that the Ethics Commissioner personally told Mr. Carney that he should not be meeting with Brookfield. Yet, on August 11th, only 1 month after the ethics screen was put in place, Mr. Carney was speaking with and taking photos with Sam Pollock, who is none other than the CEO of Brookfield Infrastructure, and who also just happened to serve on the board of Brookfield Asset Management when Mr. Carney was chair. So here we have the Ethics Commissioner telling Mr. Carney not to meet with Brookfield, and 1 month later, Mr. Carney is doing precisely that. How do you explain that, Mr. Blanchard?
Le Premier ministre du Canada est bien au courant de ses
The Prime Minister of Canada is well aware of his ethical requirements, and he follows them, each and every one of them.
So, did you see that? His response to evidence of Carney ignoring instructions not to meet with Brookfield was to say that he is somehow following the rules, each and every one of them. Ridiculous. Like, hang on though, because it gets worse. Because now I'm going to show you the other examples Mr. Cooper brought up about these questionable meetings, and I'm not going to bore you with Blanchard's long-winded ways of trying to say the PM did nothing wrong after every one of these. Just listen to him.
The Prime Minister was told specifically not to meet with Brookfield, and there he is meeting with Brookfield. Back up before that to April 30th, just 2 days after the federal election. According to the Lobbyist Registry monthly communication report, Mr. Carney was directly lobbied by North River Midstream Incorporated. Now, the Lobbyist Registry indicates that North River Midstream Incorporated, the parent company, is none other than Brookfield. So again, we have the Prime Minister directly meeting, being directly lobbied, this time on energy policy, by Brookfield. Again, not following the spirit of the ethics screen. Then, on September 27th, while in London, England, Mr. Carney attended an intimate working breakfast with Canada's High Commissioner to the UK, Ralph Goodale, and 8 international investors. 4 of the 8 investors present were from companies that have major connections to none other than Brookfield. Just another coincidence? It seems to me to be part of a pattern. Brookfield, Brookfield, Brookfield.
It strikes me as significant that 2 out of the 3 examples that Barrett has given happened after this full screen that came into place on July 10th would have been put in place by the ethics commissioner. So either Carney is breaking the rules, or the rules are made in a way that allows behavior that most Canadians see as unethical in its mere appearance and of a conflict of interest. And it blows my mind how hard these employees of Mr. Carney work to try and pretend that he's not in the conflicts that he's in, and that the ones that he does have are being managed so that there is no conflict. And sometimes I wonder if they even believe it. And I think we get the answer as to why he believes these loopholes need to exist in this statement that he makes.
It seems quite complicated to manage the Prime Minister's affairs when you have to communicate on a daily basis with the Ethics Commissioner. Would it not have been simpler for Mr. Carney to divest, as Mr. Sabia did? It was his choice. But would it not have been simpler? Because this is a criteria that we will be examining. As the Clerk of the Privy Council said to you yesterday, and as the Ethics Commissioner has said to you, you need to find a balance between attracting the best talent to politics and having ethical rules that follow the highest standards. Our ethical rules...
Did you catch that? We can't have our ethical standards too high, or we won't get the best talent. So this man believes that ethical people are less talented than unethical people like Marc Carney? I disagree. I hold disdain for the idea that we must allow corruption to attract skill. I do not believe that's true, and I believe it comes from a elitist, globalist attitude, and that would make sense because Marc Carney is himself a self-proclaimed elitist and globalist. When questioned about it, he quite literally said, people will accuse me of being that, and well, that may be just what Canada needs right now. So, yeah, it's just ridiculous that he's going to sit there and try and argue that we need to allow these conflicts of interest. Otherwise, there's not anybody that's going to be able to possibly handle these kind of jobs. And I think that's just a completely arrogant and elitist view that does nothing to serve the government of Canada, let alone Canadians themselves. But I'll let that go, because next I want to talk about a point made here by MP Gabriel Hardy, Conservative MP out of Quebec. Check this out.
Canadians are losing trust in their institutions, and every time we ask questions, we're told, yes, but there's this in the legislation, but people don't believe us. You stated earlier that you want to ensure that there's no conflict of interest for the Prime Minister, but I think the goal should be that people trust in their institutions, because if they lose trust because of our actions, well, that's a problem. We are here to represent Canadians, and when Mr. Sabia came here yesterday and said to us that in order to do honorable work and to not place himself in a problematic situation, he divested himself, and everybody agrees that that was a good thing to do. And you spoke about the Prime Minister as though he was a virtuous hero here to save the day for the country. But why did he not divest? Because this is an exceptional time that requires exceptional measures. There's a lot of pressure, and Canadians are seeing that that the Prime Minister is simply getting richer.
So you see there, he nails it here, and I'm really glad he makes this point, because the conflict is so huge and blatant that, trust me, bro, just won't cut it. The more they insist that we must trust their integrity without them having to act selflessly or do anything else to earn that trust, the less of that trust they deserve. They start to sound like the cheating spouse who gets angry when you notice the inconsistencies in their story. They're mad because you're noticing the truth. The fact that Carney's subordinate was smart enough to see how bad it looks and that he sold his shares of Brookfield within 15 to 30 minutes of learning that he would have them in his portfolio is an indictment on the fact that Carney still refuses to truly divest himself of those assets. And as much as these people are going to continue to argue that a blind trust that cannot be changed in some places, and he could have instructed the person not to, and even if he hadn't, 99% of the time they're not going to do anything, is not an actual divestiture of your interest. A true divestiture would be for you to have no interest remaining. Get out of the markets. And if you're not willing to do that, then you do not get the position of privilege that is the Prime Minister of Canada. Michael Barrett adds to this point in his next round of questioning. So check this out.
Mr. Blanchard, yesterday the clerk told us that he sold his Brookfield shares within minutes because he couldn't oversee the Prime Minister's screen while still holding them. Why shouldn't the Prime Minister meet that same standard and simply divest by selling his assets instead of holding them and the potential continuing for him to benefit financially from decisions that he takes in his role as Prime Minister?
I believe that the Prime Minister, what has been set up for the Prime Minister, is actually the highest level of standards of ethics.
So you see Blanchard rambles on about how high the standards are and trying to excuse the blatant self-enrichment of the most conflicted Prime Minister in Canadian history. He uses a lot of words to say very little and trying very hard to refuse to admit that there is any way to improve the system, insisting that it's good enough, it doesn't need any improvements. Mr. Barrett challenges that very assertion, but in this round runs out of time before Blanchard responds. He does respond in Barrett's final round, but his answer is predictably defensive of the current situation. It's a very important question, and Mr. Barrett clarifies that good things can still be improved upon. This question is worth consideration, though. So I'll leave you with that, with the final summation of his question from the first round, from the first time he answered. And I want you to consider it. I want you to let me know what your answer to his question would be down in the comments below. Engage with the video if you liked it. If you want to support me, you know how to do the YouTube things. And keep watching. Meeting 18 with the head of Brookfield is next in my queue. So keep your eyes open for that. We'll be recording it soon. Remember, everybody, stay awesome. We'll catch you soon. Here's that clip.
But is this the best way? Canadians understand that if a Prime Minister, if Mr. Carney owns assets, controlled assets, even if they're in a blind trust, and if he knows what he put into the funds that he stands to benefit from through interest payments in the future, and the decisions that he and his government take improve that portfolio, well, he's going to profit from the decisions that he takes. So if he owns it, the potential for him to financially benefit continues. Wouldn't it be cleaner? Wouldn't it be simpler? Wouldn't it improve the confidence that Canadians are able to have in the process if the requirement was for prime ministers and for party leaders, including the leader of the opposition, to sell all controlled assets, and then, if there were investments to be made, the discussion could be had on if a trustee could make those, but perhaps they don't hold controlled assets while they're in office. Wouldn't that just simply eliminate the risk and thereby solidify and actually improve Canadians' confidence?